Well, I think the road trip is a real American phenomenon. I look back and think about the wagon trains and the pioneers moving westward. After that, there was the land rushes and staking claims in the western states, like here in South Dakota. Later on, there was, during the Dust Bowl in the 30s, there was Woody Guthrie and his travels and his music and seeing America the way he saw it. Then there was Jack Kerouac and On the Road and his rambling stories and travels. And then there was Robert Frank in the 1950s doing his photography book, The Americans. And everything ever since. There's Route 66. There's the idea of Highway 1 or Highway 12 or the different roads and routes, the blue highways, the big super highways. There's the little cafes. There's the little place that there's an ice cream cone building that sells ice cream and it looks like an ice cream cone. There's there's all these different buildings, these attractions. There's a ball of string that's a humongous ball of string all rolled up by one man. This is part of the American phenomenon. If there isn't an attraction, then you make one. And you make it so people stop and buy souvenirs, buy ice cream, buy things like that. You start with free water like they did in Wall Drug in South Dakota. It turned into a great big business. I mean, this is the American essence of the road trip. Jump in the car, head somewhere, go on an adventure, open up the windows, let the wind blow back your hair, crank up the tunes, and drive, and then make a sudden pullover when you see something interesting. You pull over and you take a look at that, and you break out the Brownie camera or whatever it is you have, and you start taking pictures. So the road trip merges with the camera, merges with creativity, merges with living in the moment, getting a sense of adventure. I mean, so in a way, the road trip is a metaphor for just life itself. So it doesn't have to be a grand road trip or one that takes you to some magnificent landscape. It can be a road trip that takes you to very simplified landscapes, ones that might seem like there's more of a challenge to find that photographic experience, something interesting enough to make for a really good photograph. So this road trip idea grew out of that kind of excitement, that kind of way of perceiving of a road trip. And coming out here at first with Sid Kaplan, who was visiting me in Minneapolis, who I said, well, you got to come and see this little house that I bought out in South Dakota because I thought it would be fun to have. And I'm getting used to the idea of what I did, and I'd like to take you out there. Well, on the way out, Sid was like taking pictures of wanting me to pull over all the time as we crossed the state of Minnesota coming into South Dakota, taking pictures of the grain elevators and all the wonderful things, and some of them were things that I might have passed up myself because of just being so used to seeing that. So by going through Sid's eyes, who's used to seeing the towering buildings of Manhattan, to finding a grain elevator standing alone, maybe it's a shabby one or whatever, and that finding interest and looking at it as a muse something to walk around and look it over and go in and out, back and forth with the camera and find an image on something that is very ordinary for a lot of people maybe who live in that town. It's also a landmark for when you travel. You kind of mentally note in your head that you went by that. So if you happen to go by it again, you know that you're getting that far back on your trip to go back home or whatever. So landmarks, graveyards can offer interesting things for sure. Little stores, things going out of business, crusty buildings, things that are falling in, abandoned houses, old cars, things with grass growing up all around them, and just some of the funny things that people make and put out there for you. Like I mentioned, the Great Ball of String, which is it doesn't get much more classic than something like that, but there's on Highway 12, there's a place where a guy put a Volkswagen and cut the nose off and put it into the ground so it looks like it's half buried into the ground, nose down. You just see things and it's just wonderful. And it's an American, to me, it's an American phenomenon because maybe as you cross borders in some places, you might not see it. I'm sure Canada would be a lot like it, and it's a road trip when you do go to any other country. I guess from me being America being my home, this is my classic version of a road trip. But for me to go other ones, it would be more like travel photography, and not exactly the same as like a road trip. It'd be inspired in the same sort of way, but the fact that I'm sort of in an alien space. A different place, a different country, speaking different languages and stuff, eating different food, having different smells, all of that. I don't know. It's a different level of the road trip. So, I guess in the South Dakota road trip, it's really focusing in on the American road trip experience. Even though we've had people on the road trip that come from other countries, and so they get to experience the Highway 12 road trip as that foreign one for them too. So it's all interesting, and what I'm saying right now is a bunch of words. Mostly I'm a picture taker guy, so I take photographs to explain that, and that's kind of what this whole thing is about. It's like living in the moment, looking at those at the things as you go by, putting the brakes on the car, stopping, turning around, finding a place to park, taking those images that when you start to put your mind into taking pictures, you just let yourself see the pictures in your head, and if that works out in such a way when you're driving along, you can see a picture and need to stop the car, go over there. You kind of know almost where to position yourself because you've almost worked out the picture by the time you were driving your car and moving around. But then you can experience that whole thing where you compose and make a picture, which is your purpose is to make a piece of art, something that can reflect back that story to somebody else later, and yourself included, to that moment that when you took that picture.